Hey guys, welcome back to Sandy Cats. The first thing I want to address are these wooden blocks, which, last night I was thinking, how can I get the rig up high so I can pretty much just point out the problems with the skid systems for you. And this was my best idea. I brought way more wooden blocks actually. I was thinking of going higher. And the second I started doing this, I realized this was a stupid idea. So I'm not going to be getting under the rig. I'm probably never going to do this again, but it serves its purpose for this video. So at least you can see part of the skid system while I'm talking. This video is solely focused on CBI. On this rig, we have their bumper, their roof rack, their rock rails, and their skid plates. We went with CBI for a couple of reasons. Lexus used CBI in some of their prototype builds or the builds they were showing off. And we figured CBI must be the best. It must work the best with Lexus specifically as far as design is concerned and functionality because Lexus was using it. And then we also always heard that CBI is superior quality. We had problems. There's problems with multiple things on this build. From the rock rails that we had to chop. We had to do a lot of modifications on the skid system just to make it work properly for our use. And this bumper has some pluses and minuses. So we're going to get right into that. All right, so before we get into all the individual components, I just want to talk about CBI in general and the vibes that I got when I was working on installing these bumpers and skid plates and so on. Is CBI seems to focus way more on looks over functionality. That's the general vibe, the general motto of CBI that I can kind of tell. And as an example of the skid plate system, when I was doing my skid plate review video, I mentioned that CBI is heavier, and I made the assumption that CBI was heavier because they're probably using gussets and they're reinforcing certain parts of the skid plate. I was wrong. And a lot of the width can be cut down, like RCI does, for example, to make it more functional and lighter. So CBI does focus a lot on looks, which is okay, and actually it's great. I want a good looking rig, right? But sometimes that takes away functionality, and we'll discuss that in each individual component here. The other issue that I had with CBI was they lack instructions. For a company this big, this well known, to lack a lot of instructions is insane to me. Okay, so let's get into the bumper. I think it looks really, really good. At the time when I purchased this, there was only like 2 other companies that offered bumpers for this, so we decided to go with CBI because we thought it worked better, and it did. I love the way this thing looks. It's very, very beautiful. Minor gripes with the install. Again, the install was lacking information, so I did have to email them, and eventually I got it installed. It took me a day pretty much to install it. The one mistake I made is I cut the plastic slightly too low, that it's on the metal. It sits on the metal, so you hear that little squeaking. There you go. I don't hear it inside the vehicle, so I don't care, but eventually I might actually trim this a little more up. If you see how I did it, go a 1/4 inch higher and you shouldn't have that squeaking. The other thing with this bumper is the same issue I'm going to have with every single bumper. They're going to block airflow. So this is all plated. There's a winch here. I'm getting a lot of airflow blockage, which contributes to possibly transmissions overheating and so on. You're probably going to have that with most other bumpers. Therefore, I can't fault them for this. What I can fault them for is not having a winch access hole. When I was looking at this thing, I saw there's bolts here around these plates, and I figured the purpose of that is so you could remove these plates and have a winch access hole on both sides. Plus get some more airflow in there, right? That's a reason why we bought this bumper, honestly. And I was wrong. These bolts are solely to take this webbing plate off, so I guess you could paint match it to your car or something. Again, looks over functionality. And the only way you can access that winch, which you need to access all the time if you're actually using a winch, and these are winch bumpers, is by cutting holes in the plastic under your hood and shoving your arm all the way through and getting that access. And that's a pain, especially when you install like a training pull, which may get in the way. For me, it is in the way. It is what it is. We deal with it, but it's just not something that I want to deal with on a rig that I may be accessing a winch multiple times a day. Luckily, I'm not yet, but we may be eventually, and it's going to be a big pain. I really, really wish we had winch access holes here. So that's my one major gripe. These little holes are really well made because they're rounded, so they work good with soft shackles. Plus, over here I had to notch the tubing a little bit, and that is to fit 35s. So most likely you're gonna do this with any bumper. I can't fault, CBI for that. So I notched the tubing and I capped it, and I'm good to go. So again, the only major issue with this is lack of airflow, which they could have given me some more airflow somewhere, and the winch access holes. I may actually eventually open this up. I'm not sure yet if I can. I haven't really done the research because I got to remove this whole bumper to get that point. But in a year or so, I may open this up, reinforce it somewhere else, so I have that easy winch access hole. Would I buy this bumper again? I'm not sure if anything new came out in the last year. At the time when I was purchasing this, there was nothing that looked better in my opinion. Unless you give me a bumper that looks very similar to this and has winch access, I take that over this any day of the week. Otherwise, I'm happy with this bumper. Okay, so let's talk about the skid system, which in the end, I'm very unhappy with it. The first issue is the gas tank skid. I'll do a disclaimer. They didn't have, I'm not sure if they have it now, a GX460 gas tank skid system, but they had it for the 4Runner. I have two 4Runners. I looked at my 4Runners, and the bolt patterns look the same, so I took the risk. I bought a 4Runner gas tank skid. And it turned out that the bolts fit perfectly. It's actually a very simple install, and it should have been easy. The problem is they come with two brackets. They come with this bracket and a bracket that looks just like this, but has basically the whole side it's a gusset. So it's more reinforced. And since they don't provide me any instructions, I don't know which bracket to use. I go on online and I find a great article about the install of the gas tank skid on a 4Runner, and I find a good YouTube video. And on both those locations, they used the bracket that has the gussets, not this one, the sides. So that's what I use. I go out and test this on the street, do some minor jumps on the street, and I'm hearing some noises in the back. I take a look, and eventually I realize that my drive shaft is rubbing on the gusseted section of this bracket. So in the middle of the night, I just take my grinder, my Sawzall, and I cut off what's rubbing, and the issue goes away. But it was a big pain to deal with. Then I kind of think about it, and I find this bracket. I realize, oh, I had this bracket too. I didn't remember about it when I was doing the grinding. And then I look at RCI, my RCI skid system. I look at other skid systems, and they all come with brackets like this for the 4Runner. Only CBI provides two different brackets. And that's great. I mean, thank you, CBI, for doing that, except I wish you gave me some instructions. Then I would know that which bracket is for which purpose or whatever, right? I would know that if you're lifted, you should use this bracket. If you're not lifted, use the other bracket. But you didn't provide me any instructions, and therefore I went to this headache. So yes, I fully blame CBI for this issue because of the lack of instructions. The whole front skid system, I'm gonna compare it more to RCI because that's what I have. In my previous video that I made, I did take a jab at RCI for the customer support. And that jab still stays. I haven't talked to them since, so I don't know if they're better, but their customer support wasn't great. But I keep going back to RCI. Why? Because they build a very functional and low-cost skid system compared to everybody else. So don't not buy from RCI because their customer service isn't the best. They still have a good product. After dealing with this skid system, I really appreciate RCI because this is a two-piece skid system. And the way it installs in the back, or at least in the center part, is the bolts are so hard to reach. It's almost impossible. You got small hands. It's such a pain to deal with the bolts on the skid system. With RCI, it takes me 5 minutes, and I did this yesterday on my 4Runner. It takes me 5 minutes to remove the full skid system, all three plates. Actually, I don't need to remove the last one, two of the main plates to access my transmission, my engine, whatever I need to access. And it takes me 5, maybe 10 minutes at most to put it back on. You don't think twice about it, you just do it. It's not a big deal. With this, I dread it. It takes me 30 minutes to take this off and 30 minutes to put it back on. It's such a pain. If you're not accessing the underside of your vehicle ever, then maybe it doesn't matter, right? For me, it matters a lot. So I dreaded it. Other thing is this skid system is going to be bigger. It's wider. And you think that's functionality, but it's mostly looks, to be honest with you, because RCI does the same protection as far as the skid system is concerned. So I don't really see the need for the wider. Again, it's for looks. I like the looks too, but it's just a skid system. It adds weight. Okay, whatever. That's none of those are like, deal killers for me. The deal killer for me is I had to notch this. I had to cut a big section of this out. So if you go look at what a CBI skid plate looks like in front, mine looks substantially different. Why? Because I have KDSS. This is the KDSS. I installed the skid system and I drove it on the street and then my KDSS bracket here was hitting the skid. Okay, went online, did some research. They provided me with these 4 half-inch spacers. I didn't know what they were for at the time. And I found in the forum, because they don't give me instructions, and I found in the forum that you're supposed to drop the skid by half an inch. Okay, came back, I dropped the skid by half an inch. And the noise went away on the street. And I was happy. And then I go off-road, and right when I hit off-road and I warm up my KDSS, bam, 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 bam. I'm hearing this little section, this little piece of metal over here hitting on the skid. And now I'm pissed. So I emailed CBI and I called them and I got a response. Let me read you the response word for word. Here is the response I received from them in email, documented. Hey, I spoke with our install tech and unfortunately he hasn't messed with the KDSS a whole lot, so he didn't have any recommendations. Sorry. It's not the response I really wanted for something that I paid a lot of money for and something that they're selling as a KDSS skid, right? If you go do some research, I have an RCI front skid for KDSS and I have one for non-KDSS. It's 2 different systems. The non-KDSS one, it goes very similar to the CBI. It looks really nice. It has a really nice angle that goes well with the vehicle. The KDSS one actually goes out like this. It's uglier. It's honestly uglier because it's giving you a lot of clearance for that KDSS. And I'm pretty sure other manufacturers do the same thing. Their non-KDSS and KDSS version are probably different because it's a different shape, design. CBI did not do that. They just gave you some spacers that don't even work. So I had no choice at that point, right? I mean, what am I gonna do? I notched this and I was worried it would turn out ugly or whatever. It actually turned out really good. I'm happy with the way it looks. I have no complaints about it. But, that's not something you want to do to a brand new skid. So I'm not happy with their skids at all, to be honest with you. Okay, so let's talk about the rails now. The design is beautiful. It has really good connection points on the bottom. So I really don't have any complaints about the overall design. I did have 2 issues with the rails. The first issue is based on the instructions, and I don't remember if the instructions were from somebody else's video on YouTube, or maybe CBI had some, I just don't remember at this point. But the amount that they told you to cut off here wasn't enough. I had to keep cutting and cutting here on the bottom because what ended up happening was that I cut per the instructions wherever I got the instructions from. And whenever I was wheeling, I kept hearing this other banging noise. And eventually I realized I'm banging over here. Like the body is too close to the rails. Keep in mind, your body flex is separate from your frame. The rails are connected to the frame. So from my experience, you're gonna want at least a 1/4 inch to half an inch from all the metal that's over here under the fender flare to the rails. If you're, less than a 1/4 inch away, you are gonna hear noises. The other issue that I had was I had to do a lot of cutting here. So I cut this piece and sideways too. So I cut it multiple locations to fit 35s. I don't think these rails were meant for anybody that's running more than 33-inch tires. That I will fault CBI. I mean, they designed it to look beautiful on the stock vehicle, and it does. But I think every other rail manufacturer that I've seen keeps this short. And it doesn't look as good, I would say, but it makes it much more functional because it's so much harder to add larger tires with these rails. I think that they could have easily basically did it the way I did it, if you see how I cut this. And it would have looked just as good, but given people way less welding labor requirements for fitting larger tires. So would I buy these rails again? No, I wouldn't, even though I think they look great. I wouldn't buy them because of this. I don't want to deal with this cutting if I don't have to. Okay, so last thing is the Prinsu Roof Rack, which is made by CBI. I don't have anything too bad to say about the Prinsu. There's many roof racks out there. They all kind of function fairly similar. And as you know, I have a Southern style of Ford roof rack on that green rig and the white rig, which I'm very happy with. I decided to try Prinsu on the GX. And would I do it again? No. Again, no. And let me tell you why. So the first issue that I have with this, and it's a very minor issue, but it's my issue, is that this is a one-piece design, which A, makes it a little bit weaker, whereas the Southern style of Ford is a two-piece design. But B, it keeps this plate lower. A two-piece design will keep the plate lower to the body, so it looks nicer. It actually looks closer. I don't like the way this plate and this plate look, to be honest with you. I think it just, this gap, I don't like as much. Just because I have a Southern style of Ford and I don't have the gap. That's the only reason, I guess. Again, not the end of the world. But strength-wise, you know, if you're gonna put a lot of weight up there, it can be the end of the world. So the other issue that I have with this is the location of the extrusion bars. They are not flat here. So sometimes you want a lip, sometimes you want it to be flat. Meaning that I could, if I put something that is gonna go past the point of the roof rack, like a rooftop tent that's super wide, for example, right? And I want to sit totally flat. Can't do that here. I need to put some kind of brackets for the rooftop tent to be elevated because of this lip. My Southern style of Ford rack, it's super flat. And I prefer that over this. However, it'd be nice to have both options, right? And after getting this roof rack and kind of like really studying and realizing what I didn't like about it and then studying how roof racks are designed, if I can make one recommendation for a roof rack that I have not tested or used or had, but I wish I did, and I probably will buy in the future on something, is the Westcott Designs. The Westcott Designs roof rack is, in my opinion, from what I've seen, fantastic. It solves all the problems. Two-piece design, keeps this more flush, gives you more strength. And from what I could see, at least on the videos, it looks like there's holes in multiple locations so you can actually move the extrusion racks up and down. So you could have the lip when you need it or have it flat when you don't need it. Therefore, yeah, I wouldn't recommend the Prinsu because I don't like the lip that I have here and I don't like this design, honestly. So sorry if this is a little bit of a rant, but my goal is to be completely honest with you guys and tell you guys about my experiences personally, right? And how I look at things and not fluff everything up. So I think that I just had way higher expectations from a company that they're out there marketing like crazy. I mean, they're everywhere, right? So you kind of get the sense that they're gonna be better than everybody, but that wasn't the case. I think there might be a disconnect here because I'm more function over form. I love form, don't get me wrong, but functionality comes number one. And I think that they are more form over function. That's just my guess, kind of, based on the skid plates being hard to remove, the rails needed to be cut. I mean, everything here needed to have some kind of small modification mostly. And if anything, this makes me appreciate more companies like RCI, who, yes, I ranted on them and I'll still rant on them for their customer service. But the bottom line is, I mean, they are more function over form, where I'm paying cheaper prices and I'm getting something that's so much easier to work with, to be honest with you. So if anything, this taught me a good lesson that I need to, in the overlanding world, and I think this lesson everybody already knew, I just needed another re-up of my lessons, is, you know, the more expensive it is doesn't mean the better it is, at least not for me, right, for my purposes. So that's kind of where we're at. Thank you for listening to me, and subscribe, please. I try not to push that, but everybody else does, so subscribe. I'll be putting more videos out. Hopefully, very, very shortly, I'll be doing a real-world testing on lockers, front, rear, center, and A-track to kind of show you guys what the differences are. And I really want to spend a couple of weeks probably doing a ton of testing on tranny temps in different situations and scenarios, with coolers, without coolers, bigger tires, smaller tires. So that's going to be in a couple of weeks at least, because that's a big video. But I'm trying to get more and more videos out there for you guys. So thank you.